Cosmo looks happy. That's the first lie the show ever tells you. He smiles like nothing hurts. He laughs like nothing matters. He floats through existence with the emotional awareness of a balloon drifting toward a ceiling fan. And for years, that's been the deal. You look at Cosmo and think, wow, what a lovable idiot. End of analysis, roll laugh track. But that smile isn't joy. It's panic with good PR. Cosmo doesn't laugh because life is funny. He laughs because stopping would require thinking. And thinking for Cosmo is a dangerous activity. Thinking leads to awareness. Awareness leads to guilt. And guilt leads to consequences. And consequences are the one thing Cosmo experiences more consistently than gravity. Cosmo exists in a universe where stupidity isn't a flaw, it's a job requirement. He's not allowed to grow. He's not allowed to improve. He's not allowed to remember past mistakes in any way that might prevent future ones. Because if Cosmo ever became competent, the system would collapse. Someone else would have to be blamed. Someone else would have to absorb the chaos. And that someone is never Wanda, never Timmy, never the rules. It's always Cosmo. From the outside, it looks like comedy. Inside, it's a loop, a bright pastel-colored hamster wheel of humiliation, where the prize for effort is punishment, and the reward for failure is more failure. Cosmo is eternally surprised by consequences because the universe keeps resetting him just enough to ensure he never escapes them. And that's the core horror of it. Cosmo isn't stupid by accident. He's stupid by design. His intelligence has been surgically reduced to keep the plot moving. His judgment is faulty because the narrative demands explosions. His memory is selective because accountability would ruin the joke. Cosmo isn't just a character. He's a containment unit for disaster. So when something goes wrong, it's not oops, it's good. The system worked. Cosmo absorbs blame like a sponge absorbs water, quietly, constantly, without ever being thanked for it. And then he smiles, because smiling is safer than asking why everyone keeps yelling at him. That's what makes his existence emotionally unbearable. He doesn't live in chaos. He is the chaos, weaponized against itself. And the cruelest part? On some level, a small, flickering, underdeveloped level, Cosmo knows. Not enough to escape, not enough to change, just enough to hurt. Which is why this video isn't about how Cosmo is dumb. It's about why being Cosmo is a psychological endurance test disguised as a children's cartoon. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The terror behind the grin, the fear behind the laugh, the silent understanding that no matter how hard he tries, the punchline will always land on him. And this is only the beginning. By now, you might be thinking, okay, sure, Cosmo is dumb. That's the joke. But that framing is comforting and wrong. Because Cosmo isn't stupid in the way cartoon characters are usually stupid, charmingly, temporarily, or conveniently. His stupidity isn't situational, it's institutional, built in, enforced, maintained like a safety regulation. Cosmo doesn't have low intelligence. Cosmo isn't allowed to be smart. Anytime he shows even a spark of competence, the universe reacts like a faulty smoke detector. Alarms go off, reality panics, someone immediately shuts him down. The message is clear: do not do that again. And so he doesn't. Not because he can't, but because he's learned that every attempt at thinking ends badly. This is where the joke stops being funny and starts feeling procedural. Cosmo lives in a system where intelligence equals liability, where curiosity leads to disaster, where initiative is punished, not rewarded. He is trained subconsciously, relentlessly, to stay dumb, stay loud, stay harmless. Because harmless things are easier to blame, and blame is his real function. When something explodes, it's Cosmo. When a wish backfires, it's Cosmo. When reality collapses under magical bureaucracy, somehow, still Cosmo. He's the emotional airbags of fairy world. Everything crashes into him, so no one else has to feel it. And what makes this unbearable isn't that people mock him, it's that everyone depends on him being mockable. Wanda's competence only works because Cosmo is incompetent. Jorgen's authority only feels justified because Cosmo is always wrong. Even Timmy's wishes stay narratively clean because Cosmo absorbs the fallout. Cosmo is the mistake that makes everyone else look correct. And the worst part? He knows the role. He leans into it, overdoes it, performs his stupidity like a survival instinct. Loud laughter, nonsense sentences, zero follow-through. If he acts dumb enough, maybe the yelling stops faster. Maybe the punishment is shorter. Maybe the universe stays intact. This isn't idiocy. This is conditioning. Cosmo doesn't forget lessons because he's incapable of memory. He forgets because remembering would require acknowledging that nothing changes, that growth is impossible, that the cycle continues no matter how hard he tries. So he resets, again, and again, and again. And every reset chips away at something small but important: dignity. Cosmo's stupidity isn't funny because it's exaggerated. It's funny because it's familiar. It's the fear of trying and failing publicly, the comfort of lowering expectations so no one can be disappointed, the survival tactic of turning yourself into a joke first so no one else can turn you into one harder. Cosmo doesn't fail upward, he fails forever. And the universe claps, because the joke landed exactly where it was supposed to. Here's the part most people miss. Cosmo doesn't just make mistakes, he makes the exact kind of mistakes that keep the show alive. Every time Timmy gets a wish, the universe needs chaos. Not once, not occasionally, consistently. So Cosmo becomes the delivery mechanism. Timmy says, "I wish my teacher disappeared." Cosmo hears, "You want your entire school to turn into a sentient nightmare." Timmy says, "I wish I was popular." Cosmo hears, "Rewrite social physics and unleash emotional consequences you will never be allowed to process." It's not that Cosmo can't listen, it's that the universe won't let the wish be clean, because clean wishes don't produce episodes. So Cosmo's job isn't to grant wishes correctly, it's to generate collateral damage that can be solved by the end of the runtime. That's why his mistakes are always so specific. Not boring mistakes, not small errors, not quiet incompetence. No, Cosmo's errors are explosive, theatrical, and perfectly reversible. He's a chaos faucet, and the show turns it on whenever the pacing needs a jolt. What makes this depressing is that Cosmo can't ever be the hero of the wish. Even when he tries to help, the universe scripts his help to fail. Because if Cosmo ever granted wishes accurately, we'd have to confront a terrifying question. If Cosmo isn't the problem, then the system is. And the system can't be the problem. Not in a world where the rules are supposed to be cute and the consequences are supposed to be funny. So Cosmo stays incompetent. Not because he's dumb, but because intelligence would expose the cruelty behind the structure. Cosmo isn't a person inside the system, he's a tool the system uses to protect itself. And the longer you watch, the clearer it becomes. Cosmo doesn't cause chaos. Cosmo is where chaos is redirected so no one else gets blamed. If stupidity is Cosmo's sentence, then marriage is his daily reminder. Because Wanda isn't just his wife, she's the scoreboard. She's calm, she's competent, she understands consequences, rules, and basic cause and effect. All the things Cosmo is structurally forbidden from grasping. Every scene they share quietly reinforces the same unspoken comparison. One of you functions, one of you is a liability, and Cosmo knows which one he is. This is where the comedy gets especially cruel. The show frames their dynamic as playful contrast. Responsible wife, chaotic husband, classic sitcom math. But under that formula is something uglier. Cosmo is married to a constant witness of his inadequacy. Every eye roll, every sigh, every Cosmo said with exhaustion instead of anger. Those moments aren't just jokes, they're evaluations. Wanda loves him, yes, but love doesn't erase awareness, and awareness in this case is devastating, because Cosmo doesn't just disappoint strangers, he disappoints the person who knows him best. Wanda fixes what Cosmo breaks. She explains what he ruins. She cleans up messes he doesn't even understand he made. Over time, that love turns into labor, and Cosmo can feel that shift even if he can't articulate it. So he compensates. He tries to be louder, funnier, more chaotic. If he can't be useful, he'll be entertaining, because entertainment is safer than silence. Silence is where Wanda's exhaustion becomes visible. Silence is where Cosmo might notice how often she has to protect everyone from him. Cosmo doesn't fear losing Wanda. He fears being confirmed as the problem, confirmed as the weak link, confirmed as the reason everything goes wrong. And here's the cruel paradox. Wanda's competence keeps Cosmo safe, but it also traps him, because as long as she's there to fix things, he never gets the chance to prove he could have done it himself. Not that the universe would allow it anyway. So their marriage becomes a loop. He messes up, she fixes it, he apologizes, she forgives him. And nothing changes. This isn't partnership, it's damage control with affection attached. Cosmo lives beside someone who represents everything he isn't allowed to be, and instead of growing resentful, he turns inward. He laughs it off. He accepts the role. He becomes smaller so she can stay strong. That's not romance. That's emotional shrinkage. And it sets the stage for the next layer of cruelty, because if being a husband is hard, being a father in this system is something else entirely. Fatherhood is supposed to be redemption. It's the narrative reset button, the moment where a character finally gets to matter in a way that feels permanent, a chance to pass something forward, a chance to be seen as more than the joke. Cosmo doesn't get that. For Cosmo, fatherhood isn't growth, it's exposure. Because Poof exists as living evidence that whatever is wrong with Cosmo is not genetic destiny. The kid is smarter, more powerful, more emotionally aware. Even his magic behaves better. Poof doesn't break reality just by trying. He adapts, he learns, he responds. Which means Cosmo can't even hide behind biology. Every interaction becomes a comparison Cosmo never agreed to participate in. His own child succeeds in the ways he is systemically blocked from succeeding. And that's not inspiring. That's humiliating. Cosmo loves Poof. That part is real. But love doesn't cancel out awareness. And awareness, again, is the problem, because loving someone who effortlessly embodies what you're punished for wanting is a quiet form of torture. Poof cries, the world shakes. Cosmo cries, everyone yells. The difference isn't power, it's permission. Poof is allowed to grow. Cosmo is not. And Cosmo knows this, not logically but emotionally. He knows enough to step back, to defer, to turn himself into comic relief so his child can shine. The show plays this as sweetness, as selflessness, as parental love. But look closer. Cosmo isn't stepping aside because he trusts Poof. He's stepping aside because he's learned that when he takes up space, things go wrong. That's not parenting. That's self-erasure. And the saddest part? Cosmo doesn't even want to be the cool dad. He wants to be a safe dad. But safety requires control, and Cosmo is the one character in Fairy World who never gets control. So fatherhood becomes another arena where he's measured, compared, and found lacking. And once you feel replaceable, every authority figure starts to feel a lot more dangerous. Every system needs an enforcer. In Fairy World, that enforcer is a walking wall of muscle, shouting, rules, and consequences. Jorgen von Strangle. Officially, he's a commander. Functionally, he's fear with a uniform. And Cosmo lives in fear of him. Not the playful cartoon fear where someone yells and everything resets by the next scene. This is anticipatory fear, the kind that rewires behavior, the kind that teaches you to stay quiet, stay small, and never, ever believe you're safe. Jorgen doesn't correct Cosmo, he conditions him. There is no teaching moment here, no guidance, no chance to improve. Jorgen doesn't explain what Cosmo did wrong, he explains what will happen because Cosmo exists near a mistake. The message is simple and relentless. You are the problem until proven otherwise, and you will never be proven otherwise. Cosmo learns fast. Not how to do better, but how to avoid attention. He flinches before the shouting starts. He apologizes before understanding the accusation. He accepts blame reflexively, because fighting it only prolongs the punishment. This isn't incompetence. This is a trauma response. And the show plays it for laughs. Jorgen screams. Cosmo shrinks. The audience laughs. The dynamic repeats. No growth, no resolution, just reinforcement. What makes this especially cruel is that Jorgen represents the rules, the supposedly neutral structure that governs Fairy World. Which means Cosmo isn't just afraid of one authority figure, he's afraid of structure itself. Rules don't protect him, they target him. Every regulation is another trap. Every guideline is another opportunity to fail. Cosmo doesn't fear doing the wrong thing, he fears doing anything at all. Because in a system this rigid, action is risk, and risk for Cosmo always ends the same way. And that constant pressure doesn't make him better, it makes him erratic. His mistakes get bigger, louder, more chaotic, not because he's careless, but because fear destroys precision. The harder he tries not to mess up, the more spectacularly things explode, which of course only justifies more yelling. It's a perfect loop. Fear causes mistakes. Mistakes justify fear. And Cosmo is stuck in the middle, smiling through clenched teeth, pretending this is all hilarious. By the time Jorgen leaves the room, Cosmo doesn't relax, he waits. Because when authority works like this, it never really leaves. It becomes internal. And that internal voice, the one that says, don't try, don't think, don't exist too loudly, is far more efficient than any commander. Which is terrifying, because now Cosmo doesn't even need someone to punish him. He does it himself. Immortality is usually framed as a gift. Endless time, infinite chances, eternal existence without consequence. That's the fantasy, that's the promise, that's the lie. Because Cosmo is immortal, and nothing ever gets better. He can't die, but he also can't escape. He doesn't age into wisdom, he doesn't grow out of his mistakes, he doesn't accumulate experience in any way that matters. Every failure resets just enough to keep him functional, but never enough to let him improve. Cosmo doesn't live forever. He repeats forever. This is where his existence stops being comedic and starts feeling experimental, like he's trapped in a cosmic lab running the same test over and over to see how much humiliation one being can endure before breaking, except the breaking never comes, because the system won't allow it. If Cosmo truly snapped, the joke would end. So instead, he's preserved in a state of perpetual emotional softlock, aware enough to feel pain, never aware enough to reject the conditions causing it. He remembers just enough to anticipate punishment, but never enough to prevent it. That's not immortality, that's sentencing. Every mistake Cosmo makes has already happened before, and will happen again. The explosions blur together, the yelling blends into static, the apologies lose meaning because forgiveness never changes the outcome. Cosmo isn't learning from failure because failure isn't information here. Failure is currency. The universe runs on his mistakes, and as long as that economy exists, Cosmo has a job to do. Timmy gets wishes, Wanda gets stability, Fairy World gets order, Cosmo gets reset. Again, again, again. And immortality ensures he never outgrows this role. He can't wait it out. He can't hope for retirement. He can't even fantasize about an ending. There is no finish line, just maintenance. And in a strange way, immortality robs Cosmo of urgency. Nothing he does truly matters because nothing ever resolves. That's a dangerous psychological space where effort feels pointless and consequences feel unavoidable. So Cosmo leans harder into chaos. If nothing sticks, why be careful? If punishment is guaranteed, why avoid it? His recklessness isn't ignorance. It's resignation. Immortality doesn't make Cosmo fearless, it makes him numb. And numbness is survivable, but it's not living. This is the most uncomfortable part of Cosmo's existence. Not the yelling, not the punishment, not even the humiliation, the awareness. Cosmo isn't completely oblivious. Total ignorance would be mercy, and this universe does not offer mercy. Instead, Cosmo operates with partial clarity, brief flashes of understanding that never last long enough to save him, but they last long enough to hurt. There are moments when Cosmo hesitates, when he looks at Wanda instead of interrupting, when he pauses before touching something dangerous, when he almost does the right thing, and then the system intervenes. The joke needs him dumb. The plot needs him reckless. The universe needs him to fail. So the moment passes, the awareness fades, the mistake happens anyway. But the emotional residue remains. Cosmo knows people expect him to mess up. He knows his presence raises stress levels. He knows that when something goes wrong, eyes turn to him first, not because he's guilty, but because he's available. So he accepts blame early. He laughs first. He apologizes before anyone even finishes being angry. And that matters. Because this is not confidence, this is defensive humiliation. Cosmo humiliates himself to stay in control of the narrative. If he frames himself as the idiot, at least the ridicule is predictable. At least the punishment has shape. At least it doesn't surprise him. Surprise is the real enemy, because surprise reminds him that no matter how low his expectations are, the universe can still disappoint him. And that's when the awareness spikes. That's when Cosmo briefly realizes that this isn't just bad luck, it's structure. And those moments terrify him. So he drowns them out with noise, loud jokes, nonsense logic, overreactions, anything to keep the thought from finishing itself, because if he ever completely completes the thought, if he ever fully realizes what he is, the joke stops feeling safe. Cosmo doesn't want freedom. He wants consistency. Consistency means he can survive. Awareness threatens that. Awareness suggests alternatives, and alternatives imply loss. Because if things could be different, then everything he's endured becomes unbearable. So he stays shallow, he stays loud, he stays smiling, not because he's happy. Happiness is irrelevant. Stability is the goal. And stability in his world comes from staying stupid. Cosmo knows just enough to be afraid, not enough to escape. And that fragile balance is the most exhausting thing of all. Every system needs a buffer, something soft enough to absorb impact, something expendable enough to take the hit so the core doesn't crack. In fairy world, that buffer isn't a rule, it isn't a structure, it isn't a safeguard. It's Cosmo. Cosmo exists so the universe doesn't have to confront its own flaws. Every broken wish, every loophole, every contradiction in the rules, everything can be safely redirected into one place. The moment something goes wrong, the narrative doesn't ask why the system failed. It asks what Cosmo did. And the answer is always acceptable, because Cosmo has been pre-approved as the problem. This is why he's allowed to exist at all, not despite his failures, because of them. He is the designated failure, the living excuse, the explanation that prevents accountability from spreading upward. Rules don't break, authority doesn't overreach, magic doesn't malfunction, Cosmo messes up, and everyone moves on. This is what makes his role so emotionally brutal. Cosmo is punished not for what he does, but for what he represents. He is the release valve for a system that cannot admit error. If Cosmo weren't there, someone else would have to carry that weight, and no one wants that job. So Cosmo keeps it. He internalizes the blame so thoroughly that it becomes identity. He doesn't argue anymore. He doesn't defend himself. He barely even reacts. He nods. He smiles. He accepts the verdict, because resistance would imply the system is wrong, and the system cannot be wrong. That turns him into something worse than a fool. It turns him into a sacrifice. Not in a dramatic, noble sense. No ceremony, no honor. Just endless small losses stacked on top of each other until his sense of self erodes. He gives up being taken seriously. He gives up being trusted. He gives up being believed. All so everything else can keep working. And the tragedy is that it succeeds. The universe stays intact. The show continues. The laughter cues fire on time. The audience is satisfied. Cosmo pays the price quietly. He absorbs chaos like it's oxygen, like it's normal, like it's what he's for. And over time, he stops imagining any other purpose for himself, not to grow, not to change, but to fail in a controlled, entertaining way. Cosmo isn't the weakest character in the story. He's the strongest one the system is willing to break. And once you see that, it becomes impossible to unsee how much effort it takes for him to keep smiling while holding everything together. And now we have to ask the final uncomfortable question. Why do we laugh at this? Because it's easier. That's the honest answer. We laugh at Cosmo because the alternative is recognizing something deeply uncomfortable, that his suffering is structured, repetitive, and rewarded. Laughter becomes the release valve, not for him, but for us. It keeps the tone light. It keeps the implications distant. After all, it's just a cartoon. Bright colors, fast jokes, reset buttons everywhere. Except the pattern never resets emotionally. Cosmo gets yelled at. Cosmo messes up. Cosmo apologizes. Cosmo is forgiven without being absolved. And then it happens again. The reason this works as comedy is because it's exaggerated enough to feel unreal, but familiar enough to feel safe. We recognize the dynamic without having to confront it directly. The coworker who's always blamed, the friend who's the mess, the person who laughs first so no one laughs harder. Cosmo is a caricature of a role many people have lived, and caricatures are easier to mock than mirrors. The show teaches us how to read Cosmo. When he appears, tension drops, not because the problem is solved, but because responsibility has found a home. Someone is about to mess up, and it won't be us. That relief is powerful. It's comforting. It's funny. Cosmo carries narrative anxiety so no one else has to. Even his reactions are designed for consumption. His panic is loud, silly, exaggerated. His fear isn't quiet or dignified. It's performative, which makes it safe, which makes it laughable, which makes it easy to ignore. But strip away the timing, the music, the expressions, and what's left is someone trapped in a loop of expectation and punishment, trying desperately to meet a standard he's not allowed to reach. We laugh because Cosmo never breaks. If he cried sincerely, it would be uncomfortable. If he got angry, it would be threatening. If he left, it would force change. So he laughs instead. And we join him, because laughter keeps the system stable. It keeps the joke intact. It reassures us that nothing is wrong enough to require action. Cosmo's suffering is palatable because it's framed as deserved, because he's dumb, because he brings it on himself, because that explanation is simpler than acknowledging that sometimes roles are assigned, not earned. And once you see that, the laughter changes flavor. It doesn't stop, but it lingers. Because somewhere between the joke and the punchline, you realize you're not laughing at Cosmo anymore. You're laughing because you recognize him. So what have we actually learned about Cosmo? Not that he's dumb, not that he's reckless, not that he's hopeless. We've learned that Cosmo is necessary. Necessary to the system, necessary to the joke, necessary to everyone else's stability. Cosmo exists so the universe doesn't have to look at itself too closely. He's the error message that prevents deeper investigation, the distraction, the scapegoat with wings. And as long as he keeps smiling, everyone else gets to pretend things are working exactly as intended. That's why being Cosmo sucks. Not because his life is chaotic, but because it's predictably chaotic. Because no matter what happens, the outcome is already written. He will be blamed, he will apologize, he will reset, and the cycle will continue. Cosmo doesn't fail upward, he fails in place. And yet, this is the part that hurts the most, he keeps trying. Not in heroic ways, not in moments of rebellion, but in small, quiet efforts that barely register. He shows up. He participates. He cares. He loves Wanda. He loves his kid. He wants things to go right, even though experiences taught him they probably won't. That's not stupidity. That's resilience stripped of dignity. Cosmo survives by shrinking himself to fit the role he's been assigned. He trades self-respect for stability, awareness for survival, depth for predictability, and the universe rewards him with laughter. That's the deal. And maybe that's why we laugh too, because laughing at Cosmo is easier than admitting that some systems only function because someone is always losing. That some roles are designed to absorb pain so others don't have to. That sometimes the joke isn't harmless, it's structural. Cosmo isn't the villain of his own story. He's the cushioning, and cushioning doesn't get credit. It gets worn down. So now I want to know, which cartoon character do you think lives in the most emotionally miserable loop? The one who keeps smiling because stopping would break the system? Leave it in the comments. And if you've ever been the person who gets blamed first, the one who apologizes early, the one who laughs so the room stays comfortable, then congratulations. You already understand Cosmo. Hit like if you enjoy laughing at beautifully animated suffering. Subscribe if you want more cartoon psychology that absolutely did not need to go this hard. Because if the system needs someone like Cosmo to work, that says a lot about the system.